Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field, people are competing. We compete here on television. You compete with radio shows. You compete on Wall Street. You compete on Madison Avenue. Everything, especially in America, as it pertains to a capitalistic society, involves competition. To the victor goes the spoils.
Gabriel thought he was about to make waves with his cheap little stunt aimed at Shedeur Sanders, but instead, he walked straight into Stephen A. Smith's demolition zone. This wasn't just a clap back, this was public execution with a microphone. Imagine thinking you're playing chess, only to realize halfway through you're not even on the board. You're stuck playing checkers while Stephen A. flips the whole table. That's exactly how messy this showdown turned out. Stephen A. didn't stroll onto that set. He stormed in like a man on a mission, eyes blazing, carrying the weight of pure vengeance. It wasn't commentary, it was an ambush. Dillon Gabriel barely had time to process before Stephen had him lined up like a target at the shooting range. Poor Dillon thought tossing shade at Shedeur Sanders would earn him clout, but that shade got turned into a lightning storm named Stephen A. Picture it, Dillon puffing his chest out, acting like he's the main event, grinning like he just earned his bust in the Hall of Fame, and then boom, Stephen A. sliced through that illusion faster than breaking a breadstick at Olive Garden.
Heard of an audition, Dillon Gabriel?
There's entertainers and there's competitors, and my job is to compete.
You don't know that competition exists everywhere? That's just a dumb, idiotic, entitled statement.
Whoa.
You want to play in front of empty stands? You want to play when nobody's watching? Good luck, bro. Hope you can play under duress and adversity, because it's coming your way after those comments.
Whoa.
In an instant, Gabriel went from wannabe quarterback star to live exhibit of what happens when you poke the wrong bear. Because here's the cold truth. Nobody walks away clean after stepping toe-to-toe with Stephen A. when he's in one of those moods. You know exactly the vibe. The pitch of his voice climbing higher with every syllable, the words hitting like rapid-fire punches, and suddenly you're no longer in a sports debate, you're stuck inside a full-blown audio hurricane. Dillon Gabriel probably thought he signed up for some light banter, but what he actually enlisted in was the army of regret, and there's no discharge papers for that. And the timing? Absolutely brutal. Shedeur Sanders is on fire right now, stacking wins, stacking respect, rewriting his own narrative in real time. He doesn't need Dillon Gabriel buzzing around him like a hungry little Pomeranian snapping at scraps. But Dillon couldn't resist. He wanted to squeeze himself into Shedeur storyline, like that random guest who shows up at a wedding and grabs the mic thinking it's karaoke night.
Goes the mentality of all of America practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat, because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be QB number 2. But I know he was not talking about Shedeur Sanders. He was talking about the media. Here's the problem. You've now heightened the level of scrutiny coming your way because the media, including myself, heard what you said.
Bad move. If Shedeur's rise is a blockbuster movie, Dillon's role just got cut from the trailer, the credits, and the DVD extras. Stephen A. didn't just clap back, he hosted a parade to celebrate Dillon's irrelevance, marching a band down Main Street while waving a banner that read, "Case closed." And the scary part, it wasn't even close to a fair fight. Stephen A. doesn't argue, he performs. He stacks his sentences like concrete blocks, one on top of another, until the whole thing towers over you like a skyscraper you can't escape. Meanwhile, Dillon was still fumbling with the blueprints, confused about which end was up, while Stephen had already finished construction, hosted the grand opening, and cut the ribbon with a giant golden pair of scissors.
And you don't let it infiltrate yourself. Will you share that with everybody at home?
Yeah, I think it's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors. And I totally understand that. And my job is to compete. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Of course, we're doing this mid-game, but, you know, it's something that I'll get used to, and just want to be the best team that I can and create an environment where we can all go do our best work. That's all we want to do. You know, all you in this room are entertainers, and you have a job to do, and I respect it, right? And I'm a competitor, so I have a job to do as well.
Now let's keep it real. Dillon Gabriel isn't some scrub. The man can throw a football, he can run an offense, and he's got just enough flashes of talent to convince a hopeful fan base he's the future. On paper, he's got juice. But the second he tried to get slick about Shedeur Sanders, that was straight up career suicide by microphone. Stephen A. Smith doesn't have patience for pretenders. He can sniff out insecurity like smoke from a mile away, and Dillon was practically marinating in it. That's like showing up to a 5-alarm fire with a water pistol. You're not helping. You're getting laughed out of the neighborhood. And the wildest part? Dillon really thought he was landing shots. He thought he was stirring drama, making headlines, stealing the spotlight for himself. Instead, he became the week's biggest punchline, roasted coast to coast without even realizing it. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is probably somewhere doubled over in laughter, not even breaking a sweat. Why waste energy clapping back when Stephen A. already slammed the gavel like a courtroom judge?
Any interceptions when he was out there? You see anything like that? I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him. He showed up out on the field. You know, he played better than expected, reminded everybody who he is and what he brings to the table. I liked it. You know, but that's not to throw any shade on Dillon Gabriel. He came out there, had a couple of mishaps, what have you, but ultimately he played well, and I give him credit where credit is due. But watching Shedeur move the offense or whatever, I thought that his performance was slightly better than Dillon Gabriel. That's just me, guys.
It's the ultimate big brother move. Shedeur doesn't have to lift a finger because Stephen A. just walked into the cafeteria, picked up the bully, and body slammed him in front of the whole school. Now Shedeur gets to keep stacking highlights, building his brand and cementing his spotlight, while Dillon is stuck trying to explain why he got folded up like a lawn chair on national TV for everybody to see. And let's be crystal clear, Stephen A. didn't whisper his thoughts, not even close. He blasted them through a verbal megaphone for the entire country to hear. This wasn't some quiet scolding in the corner. It was a full-on spectacle, every syllable echoing like church bells inside Dillon's head until the poor guy looked like he forgot how to breathe. By the end, he had the same face as someone who just got dunked on so viciously they forgot how gravity even works. But the comedy here runs even deeper. Dillon actually believed he could sneak in and steal a little spotlight from Shedeur Sanders. You can almost picture him in front of the mirror that morning, psyching himself up, rehearsing lines, maybe even practicing that smug little grin. He thought this was his big TV moment. What he forgot, though,
both the Browns' rookie quarterbacks are being positioned, in their opinion, to start games this upcoming season, but how each quarterback is on a completely different developmental path for the summer here. So they said Shedeur Sanders is the one being, quote, carefully nurtured in a controlled environment, and Dillon Gabriel is being, quote, thrown directly into the fire against the team's best defenders. So that's where we transition over to this article that says why Dillon Gabriel is getting first-team reps while Shedeur Sanders waits his turn.
Is that Shedeur Sanders isn't just any quarterback. He's a name, a legacy, a walking headline, with the kind of charisma that makes whole stadiums feel like movie theaters. You don't steal light from that. You crash and burn like a moth flying into the sun. The result? A collective agreement coast to coast that Dillon Gabriel had officially downgraded himself from quarterback to comic relief. And that's the genius of Stephen A. He doesn't just debate, he creates cultural moments. Dillon won't be remembered for a touchdown, a clutch drive, or rallying his team in the locker room. Nope, he'll go down as the guy who thought he could dunk on Shedeur Sanders, and instead got turned into a national blooper reel. Honestly, if Dillon's PR team had even half a brain, they'd be slapping this fiasco on t-shirts right now. Stephen A. roasted me, and selling them by the truckload. Because let's keep it real, that's the only marketable thing Dillon's got left. He's not trending for stats. He's not celebrated for leadership. He's trending because Stephen A. pulverized him into dust on live TV, and the replay button won't stop getting abused. And here's the kicker.
Look better to you in what they were asked to do than the other.
And just throwing the ball
It's not close. Shedeur Sanders.
It's not close
not
either.
Close. No.
Wow. That's okay. Now that's
But
news.
that's news.
Me,
But let me couch that by saying this is rookie minicamp.
Sure.
No pads, no full speed competition,
but it is-
nobody coming to knock your head
It's
off.
telling. They're side by side, and they're not asked to do much, but they're both asked to do the same thing. And that one of them looked discernibly better than the other. I think that I didn't know that we would.
Dillon did this to himself. The moral is plain and simple. Never come for Shedeur Sanders when Stephen A. Smith is anywhere within earshot. 1 second you're trying to get a cheap laugh, and the next you're starring in the How Not to Embarrass Yourself masterclass. Dillon Gabriel walked in cocky and walked out a cautionary tale, and the rest of us, we just got premium entertainment with front row seats. The internet, though, oh, it's undefeated. The second Stephen A. fired that verbal missile, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and every group chat in America lit up like fireworks on the 4th of July. People weren't just watching the takedown, they were reliving it, looping it, zooming in on Dillon's face like a crime scene, dissecting every twitch, every stutter, every second of realization that he had stepped straight into disaster.
Cleveland Browns rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders, son of Deion Sanders, and Dillon Gabriel, both fighting for a position on the Cleveland Browns depth chart at quarterback. Now, what I find interesting here was last week, Shedeur Sanders had an opportunity to play in the preseason. He did well, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And this week, Dillon Gabriel had an opportunity to play as well. He had an interception that was ran back for a touchdown, and he had a fumble in which the team lost the ball a second time.
Memes exploded instantly. Dillon as a cartoon character flattened into the pavement like Wile E. Coyote after another failed Roadrunner chase. Only this time, the Roadrunner was Shedeur Sanders, and the falling anvil? That was Stephen A.'s booming voice dropping from the sky. And fans weren't letting up. They turned Dillon Gabriel into a new unit of measurement for failure, the standard for don't ever try this again. Man, that whole scene was a train wreck. Straight up Dillon Gabriel energy. People were even saying stuff like, that flop? Total Dillon move. Imagine trying to take your shot and bricking it so hard the crowd doesn't cheer. They laugh. That's exactly what Dillon pulled off, going from quarterback to full-blown punchline in less than 24 hours. That's not just a bad look, that's legacy erosion happening live in high definition. Meanwhile, Shedeur didn't even break a sweat. No tweets, no posts, no clapbacks, nothing. Why waste an ounce of energy swinging when you've got Stephen A. Smith dropping verbal nukes on your enemies for free? Shedeur could just lean back, throw on some shades, sip on something cold, and watch the world roast Dillon down into fine dust. That's the art of passive victory, winning by simply existing while your competition self-destructs. Shedeur didn't just look unbothered, he looked untouchable, while Dillon trended as football's newest piñata. And the irony? Shedeur's name alone was enough to spark the whole fiasco. It's like being the headliner at a sold-out concert while someone else volunteers to bomb on stage before your set. The crowd boos them into oblivion, and you don't even have to play a note to look like the star.
Working with Flacco, Pickett, first teams, and Shedeur, like I said, often works with himself on a different field with the second and third string guys. Mary Kay Cabot, she said they are using mostly Dillon and Kenny Pickett to try to figure out what works in this offense and what doesn't. It's a new scheme. They have to throw some things out. They have to put some things in, and they're not putting all of that on Shedeur's plate as the fourth team quarterback. They're trying to get Kenny and Dillon possibly ready to play, maybe to be the starter and the backup possibly. And, during the pre-draft process, Shedeur Sanders, one of the big pluses in his column was most pro.
Dillon's biggest mistake? Thinking it made him look bold. In reality, it made him look desperate, and Stephen A. smelled that desperation instantly, circling like a shark that just spotted blood in the water. Stephen A. didn't just circle Dillon, he pounced. You could see it in the way he leaned forward, the fire in his eyes, the way his voice kept climbing higher and higher until every word felt like it carried a decade's worth of frustration with quarterbacks desperate to manufacture relevance. Dillon wasn't a rival, he was prey, unlucky enough to stumble into the lion's den right at feeding time. And the comedy gold, Dillon's face. That split-second look when he realized the vibe had flipped completely against him. He strutted in smirking, convinced he'd just dropped the bar of the century. But by the time Stephen A. was finished, he looked like a student who got caught cheating on an open book test, confused, exposed, and wishing the ground would swallow him whole. That's the cruelest part of TV. You think you're the star, but turns out you're just the setup for somebody else's punchline. And let's not forget, Stephen A. has been doing this for decades. He's mastered the art of dismantling someone using nothing but his vocal cords. Dillon stepping into that arena wasn't bold, it was reckless. Like climbing into the boxing ring with a legend when you've never thrown a punch in your life. The funniest part? Shedeur's fans didn't even need to show up to defend him. They didn't have to argue stats, pull out highlight reels, or say a word. All they had to do was point to Stephen A. and say, "Case closed." It was like hiring a lawyer so good the judge doesn't even let the other side finish their opening statement. Dillon's case wasn't just weak. It got tossed out before the trial even started. And here's where it gets brutal. Dillon thought he was making himself part of the storyline. Instead, the storyline became crystal clear. Stephen A. Smith destroys Dillon Gabriel, not debates him, not challenges him, destroys him.
Interviewed, he said something I found interesting, which I thought was a shot at his fellow teammate. He said, some people are entertainers and others are competitors. I see myself as a competitor. I thought that was a stray he was trying to throw at his fellow teammate Shedeur. And one thing I can tell you in my short lifespan of 47 going on 48 years, that context, words, and body language matter. More importantly than that, you don't get more light when you try to dim.
The headline practically wrote itself. Dillon's name wasn't tied to his own hot take anymore. It was stapled to his humiliation. That's the kind of branding you can't wash off no matter how many touchdowns you toss in the future. It sticks like a scarlet letter, only louder and way more embarrassing. And don't think for a second his teammates missed it. Locker rooms are savage. You already know those guys are pulling out their phones, replaying that clip on loop and clowning him every chance they get. Hey Dillon, you still want to talk slick to Stephen A? The man tried to rattle Shedeur and ended up rattling himself. That's the difference between a star with momentum and a guy scrambling for scraps. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. Shedeur Sanders is soaring, cementing himself as one of the most talked about quarterbacks in the game, while Dillon is scratching and clawing just to stay relevant. One is on the rise, the other is slipping fast. And Stephen A. drew that line in permanent marker so thick nobody can miss it. You couldn't script this better in Hollywood if you tried. And you know Stephen A. relished every second. This is his stage, his arena.
Stefanski has decided to make Dillon Gabriel the QB2. Shedeur, in my mind, should be the backup. Shedeur is the better quarterback. I sort of see Dillon Gabriel, more of a system type quarterback. I do know that, Shedeur, he may not have the athletic traits or the speed of a Josh Allen, but I do think he has the poise and the comfortability just sort of carrying himself as a quarterback, where I really feel like he's going to end up having success here in the NFL, even though he dropped around 5, even though tons of teams passed on him, maybe for different kinds of reasons.
Moments like this are why he's a household name. For him, it's not just about being right. It's about putting on a show while being right. Dillon didn't just get corrected, he got obliterated theatrically, dramatically, and mercilessly. It was entertainment, it was comedy, and it was sports commentary turned into Shakespearean tragedy. With Dillon Gabriel cast as the fool who didn't even realize he'd wandered into the wrong play. And that's the punchline. Dillon Gabriel's big gamble backfired so spectacularly that it didn't just hurt his reputation, it cemented a new identity. He's no longer the quarterback fighting for recognition. He's the cautionary tale every rookie will hear when they even think about poking the wrong bear. His name is now stamped in sports history as the guy Stephen A. Smith turned into a blooper reel. The fallout was instant. Headlines didn't say Dillon made a bold statement. They screamed Stephen A. destroys Dillon Gabriel. Clips flooded timelines, memes went viral, and suddenly Dillon wasn't controlling the conversation. He was the conversation, and not in the way he wanted. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, he didn't even have to move a muscle. His brand only grew stronger, while Dillon burned out in real time. Shedeur came out looking like the untouchable star, the golden prince of primetime, while Dillon looked like the crash test dummy that proved why you don't step into Stephen A.'s crosshairs unprepared.
surprised? I can't speak for everybody, but I feel like a big chunk of people knew that Shedeur Sanders throws the ball better than Dillon Gabriel. That's why a lot of people were surprised when the Browns drafted Dillon Gabriel ahead of Shedeur Sanders, and that's why a lot of people were even more surprised that Shedeur Sanders fell that far in the draft to begin with. At this point, I think Joe Flacco is probably going to be QB1 in Cleveland, but QB2 and 3 is going to be between Kenny and probably Shedeur. And that's not to say Dillon Gabriel is a bad quarterback or anything, but Shedeur Sanders was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college football. And yes, there was questions about his arm strength or whatever, but nobody questioned his talent to throw the ball and to be accurate. So hearing that Browns reporter say it's not even close doesn't surprise me at all. But I just think we got to question the Browns for drafting 2 quarterbacks in the same draft anyways.
This wasn't just a debate. It was a televised career lesson, a showcase of what happens when confidence meets reality, and reality has a louder microphone. Dillon thought he'd be remembered for his words. Instead, he'll be remembered for his silence. The silence that came after Stephen A. completely shut him down. So what do you think? Was this the harshest takedown Stephen A. has delivered in years, or was Dillon just the wrong guy at the wrong time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one. The way Stephen A. raised his voice 3 octaves higher wasn't just heated commentary, it was a full-on performance that turned Dillon into a walking meme factory. Every word Dillon tried to throw into the mix evaporated instantly, but Stephen A.'s takedown? That's burned into the collective memory forever. That's the curse of trying to ride someone else's shine. You don't just fail, you get remembered for failing. Now Dillon is trapped in that loop. He thought he was climbing Shedeur's mountain, chasing a little spotlight, but instead he got crushed under the avalanche Stephen A. unleashed. And the wild part? That avalanche is going to echo through highlight reels, group chats, and memes for years to come. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you on the next one.